Thank you for tuning in today to I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, online at retirementreformation.org. Did you know that when you retire, your calling doesn't retire? Your calling is a lifetime calling, and if you're still around, God is not done with you yet. You've tuned in to I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation, an organization dedicated to you, the retiree who loves Jesus and wants purpose for all of your days, especially the ones in your retirement. Bruce Bruinsma joins us today as the founder of the Retirement Reformation. He's here to encourage you and walk with you through retirement. And I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Check us out online, retirementreformation.org, retirementreformation.org. Are you asking yourself questions like, how am I doing in my retirement? Am I experiencing God's best in my retirement? Do I feel fulfilled in my retirement? Is there evidence that the Holy Spirit is active in my retirement? You've joined us in part 2 of a 3-part series of asking the best questions in our retirement. And Bruce Bruinsma today is going to highlight 9 evaluative questions, easy for me to say, that we should be asking ourselves to kind of take a temperature, take a gauge, look at a metric on how are we doing in retirement and connecting our faith to our retirement and making sure we're getting the best out of this fourth quarter in life. Bruce, I'm excited for today's show as we talk about these 9 evaluative questions. But let me just ask you this question. Why are we asking ourselves questions?
We're asking ourselves questions because there's so much that we don't know. And the only way that you learn is to ask questions and then to be able to receive that answer from someone who does. And though someone who does fits into some different categories, they may be friends or wise people that you know that will come up with answers, but then you've got Scripture and you've got the Bible, because the one who really knows is God the Father, as expressed through God the Son, Jesus, who then is available to us as the Holy Spirit. And so if we don't ask questions, we're not going to learn anymore. Matter of fact, the only one who learns is the one who asks questions, not the one who pontificates.
All right, so what we're going to do in segment 1 and 3 is we're going to go through those 9 questions, and I'd love for you just to give us a little bit of perspective on where this question comes from. And then in segment 2, we're going to hear from Scott Couchenour about his business tree, talking about the fourth quarter and really serving strong in that fourth quarter. I'm really excited for you to meet him because this will be your very first time I'm meeting him. All right, so the very first evaluative question you're saying we should ask is, and we're circling a number between 1 and 10 and how we feel we're doing on this, and 1 was not so good and 10 is fantastic, right, Bruce? That's what those were? All right.
That's what they are. That's exactly correct.
So the question...
The source of the questions follows the outline of the 9 fruits of the Spirit.
Nice.
And so just as a reminder to us that the Holy Spirit is in us to help us become more Christ-like. And so it starts with love, then joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. And so it is those characteristics. And so as I reflected on what are ways to ask about those things that we can evaluate where we are on that screen. One of the things that I thought about was if I asked it in the most positive way, and so it asks, let's say, the question about love was, my basic attribute is that I express love to everyone I meet all the time. Well, no, probably not. So maybe we need to start at another place to give us a chance to self-evaluate where we are. So therefore, the way that the first question is worded, Jim, is I seldom express love to those around me and seldom receive love. So you can have a 1, which that would make that 100% true all the time, or 10, no, that's never true. But that question of how do we express love is an important question, and how do we receive it? So for example, I've got a friend, every time I give him some love, give him an attaboy, he always, no. He's not able to receive love and affirm it. Instead, he gives us that dumb answer, which isn't true. And I can't get him to break that. But at any rate, the first question
But that could be that words of affirmation is not his love language, Bruce. I mean, in order to express love and receive love, you need to know your love language so that you know how to receive love.
That is definitely true. I need to put a golf club in his hand.
A golf club in his hand, or maybe he needs a candy bar. You never know. He needs a nice gift. All right, so number 2 question is, I do not find much meaning and purpose in my daily activities. That goes to the joy part. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think having that question in front of you and reflecting on it opens the doors for perhaps more questions, perhaps a greater seeking, or an aha moment of, yeah, I'm not finding much by way of meaning and purpose in my life. This is pretty much of a dredge, and so on in my daily activities. So that's where that one comes from.
I think a lot of people, Bruce, struggle with the joy thing, though. They equate joy and happiness together. But that's not really. But that's not really true, though, is it?
No, it definitely is not. Matter of fact, when you get a copy of my book that'll be coming out, I spend a lot of time identifying those differences and what that is and how that plays out in our daily life. Now, the third one is I am usually agitated and somewhat depressed during the day. I tell you, I look out over audiences and I see some folks that, man, I don't know, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon or it's 6 o'clock at night, and they just look unhappy. They just look agitated, like, why is the world the way it is? And it's not fair. And so they're living that life. And that's not the life of a Christ follower that we have available to us. So I'm usually agitated and somewhat depressed during the day. There's, what kind of goes along with that is that when that is true in your life, then when you meet other people, then you put on that mask and you put on that face. And you say, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. It's wonderful. Horse pucky. You're not either. And so let's find out what's true.
Remember, if somebody tells you, Bruce, that they're fine, remember what you're supposed to say. Really? Fine? Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional? Really? How are you really doing? You have to ask that. That goes,
And what's interesting is I think for many of us, those are the conversations that take place in the entry to the church. When you come in or after the service and you're having a cup of coffee or you're standing around talking and, how you doing? Oh, great. Maybe not. And so to realize that, I think there are more lies told in the entry to a church than there are any other place.
That's terrible. All right, talk to me about the kindness question. What's the kindness question? Or not kindness, peace. We had love, joy, peace, patience. Patience. Oh, Bruce, we're not supposed to pray for patience.
Yeah, that's for sure. I am often frustrated and impatient with circumstances and those around me. And so that's unfortunately, I think that's a normal state for way too many. And it leads to that impatience, leads to that frustration and the anxiety and the rest of it that comes along with it. And all of these, if in fact you're on the 1 or 2 side of the scale, the net result of that is going to be loneliness. And when that net result is loneliness, that leads to all kinds of things. And we've talked about that on here, and we can talk about it some more. But the next one is intentional kindness is something I regularly practice or experience.
And when we come back in the third segment, we're going to deal with that intentional kindness question. You're listening to I Retire For Him. We'll be right back with segment 2 with Scott Couchenour. Hang on.
Recreating Retirement is an interactive small group study helping you to move from nothing to what's next. You can join us on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. East Coast time on Facebook Live. Our goal for this study is to provide a group setting for interaction and new ideas while leading you through a first step in your journey from retirement to reformation. Here's the big idea. During the next 5 years, 5,000 small groups will experience this journey of discovery in churches and faith-based organizations across the country. Is your church a place where recreating retirement needs to be planted? Join us online to experience the study or prepare to lead a small group at your church or ministry. Email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org or go to our website at retirementreformation.org. That's retirementreformation.org.
Hey, welcome back to I Retire Frame, and as we do in every second segment of every show we've ever done, and this is the 116th episode, we always bring on somebody that sharing their story of how God is helping them live out their life in their quote-unquote retirement years, maybe differently than what you're listening to or what you're living out, and we want you to hear somebody else's story because we're always inspired by people's stories. We've got Scott Couchenour here today. Servingstrong.com. He's here to talk about the fourth quarter. But Scott, my first question is this. Your retirement age, 59 going on 60, but you're not retired. Why?
Well, it dates back to working in my father, the company my dad started. We designed and built churches across America. We did that. He incorporated in 1970, and fast forward all the way to 2008, when the stock market took a nosedive. That was the beginning of the end of our family business. For the next 5 years, we struggled in sales, and the board of directors elected me to become the CEO, moving from COO to CEO to reinvent our company, which I did. We started to really get our bearings, and we started to get hope. But it all centered on one project that had to start in June of 2015. We had $20 million in design that we were working toward, and this project would be the bridge to our future, the bridge to that 20 million. I got a call from the project manager, Steve, who I expected him to say we got started. It was in the middle of June. Instead, he said, "Are you sitting down?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because apparently the pastor had been having an affair with the secretary, and the news just came out." And I don't know if you have ever been speeding and you look in the rear view and you notice there's a police car hiding on the side, and all of a sudden he flips the lights on and is right behind you, and your stomach goes to your bowels and you say, "Oh no." Well, 10x that, and it won't come close to what I felt that moment. We had to close the business after 44 years, 760 projects. And I was a 50-year-old without a career. And that really changed everything for me. The proverbial death of my career. I also lost my identity because I had attached my identity to my career. And when my career was gone, my identity was gone. So for the next 18, 25 months, I struggled with who I was, not to mention what I was going to do next. And slowly but surely, through God's grace and his mercy and his guidance, and in spite of me trying to make things happen, he began to realize, he began to show me that what I had gone through could be redeemed. And there was a resurrection of sorts. And now I am helping people. I'm the partner I wish I had had in 2013. I would have been a lot more strategic, but that's why. And now I'm looking at my friends who are all quote unquote doing the things that retirees do. You know, they're stepping down, they're dipping into their retirement funds, they're doing some traveling, but I am an accidental entrepreneur doing a startup, and that's why I'm not retired. Now, that's the logistics of why I'm not retired, but I cannot imagine doing anything else for the rest of my life.
All right, so hang on to that thought. I don't want you to give it all away. All right, you've been evaluating guys retiring, people retiring. What have you seen as an affliction, a common affliction amongst Christian retirees?
It's primarily, I'm giving up. I'm done. It's funny. In business, we talk about exit strategy, exit planning, right? As if we're going to exit our business. And what's implied, but not really thought about, is I'm going to exit my life. My career is going to be done. I'm handing it over to the next generation. I'm handing it over to the new owner. And so I'm done. And I think this comes back from years and years of this idea that there is one hill. You know, when you turn 40, the saying goes, "Lordy, Lordy, look who's 40." And there's always black balloons, and you're over the hill, as in there's one hill. But I would really encourage your listeners to get a book called From Strength to Strength, which illustrates that there are two types of intelligence. There's fluid intelligence, which is in our early years and begins to wane in mid-30s. But there's a second intelligence called crystallized intelligence that begins to grow and grow and grow. And research is showing that the brain and the plasticity of the brain indicates that we never stop learning. So I think the affliction is we've given in to the lie that once we reach a peak in our life, somewhere in the 40s, 50s, that we begin to slowly decline, and we continue to decline and decline. And I see this horrible thing where people have stopped living long before they're buried. And they've given up. They've gone to the sidelines. They're saying, I've done my work. I've done my thing. It's over. I'm going to let the young people take over. And that's horrible.
It is. Bruce?
There's another piece that goes along with that too. That's such a great insight. But it's, I am now owed leisure. And leisure becomes then my meaning and purpose. And there's not meaning and purpose in leisure.
No.
And so you've got 30 years of trying to convince yourself that something that is not true is true, and that it has meaning and purpose, and that your life goes from there. And it's insidious, and I'm afraid the evil one is so happy.
I'm pretty sure
because it's sidelined so many.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the evil one was working with Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, when he set into place this whole Social Security plan, because it is for the last almost 90 years has told people, when I'm hit 65, I'm done, and I get to go and have fun and do the rest. I mean, but when they said it, people were only living to 63, and now people are living to 93 and 103. All right, Scott, you've got an organization called Serving Strong, servingstrong.com. What's that all about?
That is all about helping you strategize your fourth quarter by getting you in touch with your core values, your gifts, your strengths, just doing an inventory of everything that you've accumulated in your 50 plus years, and determining what is the recipe for those ingredients. And we end up creating a strategic planning document. A lot of people I work with in business, they understand strategic planning and execution on the business side. That's pretty standard. Not many people think of it in terms of a personal side. The personal strategic plan. What is my purpose statement? What is my vision for if I'm true to my purpose over the next 20, 30 years in this fourth quarter? What does my world look like? What does my life look like? And then my mission statement. How am I going to get there? I mean, there is no better reason to pursue a purpose than in your fourth quarter. And I'll tell you, here's my hypothesis. My theory is that the fourth quarter, we can make a greater impact in the fourth quarter than we could ever make in all previous three quarters combined. And here's for two reasons, many reasons, but two primary reasons. Number one, we have a wealth of experience, and that gives us a lot of wisdom. And we can tap into that. I'm surprised at how many people don't tap into their story and milk out the rich wisdom that comes from the experience, the failures, the successes that they have accumulated. That's number one. Number two, there's this idea of being awakened to mortality. And so that gives us a sense of urgency. So when you can combine a wealth of experience with a sense of urgency, and you combine those two, you can do more in your fourth quarter than you ever have done in the past.
Scott, I really wanted to ask you.
Appreciate, brother. That's 100%.
And Bruce, now you can see why I wanted Scott on here. I didn't get a chance to prep Bruce today before we were interviewing Scott, but these guys need to have a conversation offline. Scott, I wanted to hear from you. You've identified 6 hallmarks of a fourth quarter strategic plan. Are you willing to hang around for our next podcast to give us those 6 hallmarks?
Absolutely.
All right.
Happy to.
You're listening to I Retire for Him. Well, we started I Work for Him, but I Retire for Him with your hosts, Jim Brangenberg and Bruce Bruinsma from the Retirement Reformation. We're going to be right back with more of our conversation on the evaluative questions we need to ask ourselves. And on the next podcast, we'll hear the second part of this interview with Scott Couchenour about those 6 hallmarks of the fourth quarter strategic plan. Hang on for just a second.
Our work on this earth doesn't end when the paycheck stops. God calls us to be faithful for a lifetime. Whether you're looking forward to retirement or you're already there, our all-small group study, Recreating Retirement, will help you understand, engage, and activate what God has for you in this fourth quarter of life. Join Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma as you consider your past, strengths, spiritual gifts, and your passions, and how they all come together as the call God has for you in these years. Connect with us on our online community group at facebook.com/Retirement Reformation, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, or if you'd like to bring Recreating Retirement to your church, email us at contactus@retirementreformation.org. Are you ready to start your life-changing journey today?
Hey, welcome back to I Retire From. Great conversation with Scott Couchenour. Bruce, I want to jump back. You were just getting ready to introduce question number 5, which was about kindness. When I cut you off, we had to go to break.
Well, let's go back to that one because it's an important question. And the first 2 words are really the key. Intentional kindness. Not just kindness, but intentional kindness is something I regularly practice or experience. Now, I don't know about our audience, but this is one that I got to continually ask myself and work on when there's a situation there. Is my response to it one of kindness, or is my response one of impatience, or is how stupid could you be, or any of those kinds of answers, or that's really dumb? But does my spirit and my soul reach out to the circumstance, and am I expressing the kindness of Jesus and demonstrating that in what I do? I have a friend, and at our church, and lost his wife about a year ago. Gone through some nasty physical things. Had a knee replaced, and a hip replaced, and a shoulder replaced.
Oh my, he's bionic.
But he's bionic. Every Sunday morning, he's at the front door welcoming people. Last Sunday morning, we had some kind of a mixture of snow and rain. It was slush, and it was just nasty. And so as I pulled up and let Judy off at church and went and parked the car and came back, there was my friend Bill with a broom and a squeegee, pushing that snow and that stuff off the front way so that people could come in. He didn't have to do that. My goodness gracious, he's in his 70s. He's bionic. He's got every reason in the world to go sit in the back row and be grumpy. And in fact, he shows kindness by his actions. That might not be the way that I would show kindness, but in fact, we all have those ways. So intentional kindness is something that I regularly practice or experience.
All right, question number 6.
I am primarily focused on myself and my issues and my needs. As we get older, those physical needs and the emotional and all the rest of them kind of become heightened and accelerated. And so as in our very humanness, we focus on what it is that I need, or why isn't this happening for me, or why is the food where I'm living so rotten, or whatever it may be. But I'm all focused on me, and that's all part of that shrinkage that we talk about, and so on. And so I'm primarily focused on myself. And that's where the loneliness then comes from. And that's where the depression comes from, and the anxiety, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, when you're all focused on yourself, that depression just gets overwhelming.
You're just focused on yourself. Why don't my kids come see me more often? Why don't? And so there's a key one. So the next one is faithfulness plays a small role in my thinking about retirement. So what in the world does faithfulness mean to you? What are you being faithful to? Are you being faithful to yourself? Are you being faithful to the commandment of Jesus? Are you being faithful to what he commands us to do? And so faithfulness if it plays a small role. And so you get this one may take a little reflection to be able to say, where in there am I a 1 or am I a 10, or am I kind of stuck in the middle at 4 or 5 somewhere? So faithfulness plays a small role in my thinking about retirement. And then moving on, I believe my rights are the most important thing for me to protect. Let me say that again. I believe my rights are the most important thing for me to protect. And when we get engaged in sometimes political conversations and others, it's all about my rights. They're trying to take whatever it is away, and they can't do that. And I have a right to be, I have a right to be happy. And so I think here's one. How could they take my music away?
Oh, now, Bruce, come on, you're lighting fires now.
I am. And it's my right that I be able to listen to old-fashioned hymns, and that's what I like, and that's what I should have. And all these young whippersnappers are putting together these guitars and drums, and oh my gosh, what am I doing? So those are my rights. And again, it plays itself out in so many different arenas.
But you're relating that to gentleness. Tie that into me, because that's the gentleness part of the fruit of the Spirit. How do you relate that?
Well, when in fact you are demanding your rights, you're not going to be very, very gentle. You're going to be a pain in the tail, and you're going to be somewhat nasty, or as we say, grumpy. And so when we're grumpy, that fruit of the Spirit isn't anywhere to be seen. So it's not much of a model to our grandchildren. It's not much of a model to other Christians. Certainly not much of a model to those who are serving us, for example, in a restaurant or wherever it may be. And so
how about that final one, the one that relates
to evaluate.
The one that relates to self-control. How about that final one?
My emotions are the most powerful drivers of my actions and responses. My emotions are the drivers. I'm so mad. They can't. I'm not going to let them. They're trying to. Those are all the emotional drivers that then are reflected in our words, our deeds, and the gentleness of our soul.
That self-control in our actions. And what's really the overall conversation about today is that when we're alive, God's not done with us yet. There's so much more refining of our spirit that can be done. And the closer we get to the Lord, the more we work on things specifically, like we've just talked about, those 9 questions we need to be asking. But Bruce, if you meet a senior, somebody that's retired, 55 plus, that's asking themselves these questions on a regular basis, let's say weekly or monthly, how do you see them differently? As we close out the show today, how do you see them acting and experiencing retirement differently than somebody who may not be asking those questions?
Well, number one, it's the signal that they are open to God's Spirit speaking to them, entering in them, and acting through them. Someone who's not asking these kinds of questions is, again, that focused on themselves, and the results of that are generally not good, whereas the results when we care for others and we can express that and we're open to input. And so, one of the questions that, and we'll talk about this in our next podcast, but when you ask the question, when someone says something to you that you don't understand or you don't even agree with, and you, instead of telling them that, you ask them, well, what do you mean by that? There's a question that opens the door to relationship, to input, and to the opportunity to then to be able to share what God means by that, or in that circumstance that otherwise we'd miss.
But to summarize, somebody who's asking these questions is going to experience God in their retirement. And somebody who's not is likely to experience all that the world has to offer. For, what was that, Grumpy Old Men? They made a movie about that, I think. Bruce, great questions. I'm so glad that you've given us this evaluation. Are these forms going to be available online, or are they just going to be available at the Oxygen for Life or Retirement Voices kind of events?
No, if you'll just send an email to or put a note on our website, we'd be happy to send you a PDF of these. And I think the conversation we had in our prior podcast about why ask questions, these evaluative ones and the ones we'll talk about as reflective in the next ones would be wonderful, wonderful conversations for your small group or your church class or a Sunday school class or maybe even a family reunion.
Wow, that's a great idea. Well, thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate the conversation. Again, part 2 of a 3-part series, really asking, why are we asking questions in retirement? What should we be asking? Those are the evaluative questions. Next up on the next podcast, the reflective questions. You've been listening to I Retire for Him, the voice and resource of the Retirement Reformation with your host, Jim Brangenberg, and Retirement Reformation's very own founder, Bruce Bruinsma. Make sure you check us out online and get all these resources online at retirementreformation.org. We're Christ followers enjoying God's best on our way from retirement to reformation so we can ultimately say, I retire for Him.
I retire for Him.
Thanks for listening to I Retire for Him with your hosts Jim and Martha Brangenberg and Retirement Reformation founder Bruce Bruinsma. I Retire for Him is the mouthpiece of the Retirement Reformation. Most Christians tend to follow the world's pattern of rest and self-pampering during retirement. However, in your retirement, you can be focused on God's unique call to love, serve, and help others. This can be your best season of life if you take advantage of a life's worth of knowledge and experience and combine it with a greater freedom of time and money and invest it all in the generations both preceding and following you. The Retirement Reformation is encouraging Christians to find and follow God's call in all seasons and aspects of life, especially in retirement. Take time to sign the manifesto at retirementreformation.org and explore the wealth of resources available on our site. Join this movement of God and journey from retirement to reformation so you can say, I retire for Him. Go to retirementreformation.org.